I'd like to introduce Greg Epstein. Greg, so you're the president, right, of Perry Videx?
I'm the president and CEO of Perry Videx.
I know there's a lot of bankers out there that want to know what's going on with values. Greg, what do you see right now relative to value stability, comparing it to, let's just pick an arbitrary date at the beginning of the year?
Well, I think a more arbitrary date would be, say, early to mid-March, when it became kind of evident that things are going to change in the country in terms of businesses being open, closed, and until that point in 2019, into the first couple of months of 2020, it was actually a pretty robust secondary market from both the retail side. All cylinders were firing on both on that part of the business and on the auction part of the business until mid-March. And what happened in mid-March just threw this enormous blanket of uncertainty into our market. Companies that access the secondary market typically are small, medium-sized companies. When they buy equipment, it's CapEx. It's an investment for them. And investment hates uncertainty. Really, from mid-March to mid-April, there was just a strange kind of freeze frame that occurred in all except for in three sectors. Those sectors were anything that had anything to do with making hand sanitizer. We could not sell enough equipment to make hand sanitizer we're still selling it. There's going to be a big glut of hand sanitizer equipment.
Yeah, well, we're seeing, you go into any 7-Eleven and you can pick your flavors now.
But in those first 2, maybe even 3 months, we sold every stainless steel tank we could. We sold every high shear mixer, because these are gels, and when you mix the isopropyl alcohol with whatever the gelling agent is, usually it's aloe vera gel, you need a high torque mix. So all the high torque mixers, double motion scrapers, all of that was just walking out the door. That was one type of equipment post March that was and continues really to be strong. The other was in the alcohol distillation world, where every craft distiller and craft brewer decided to make just alcohol to ferment to sell to people who were making hand sanitizer. And so that brought a whole array of demand for things like tanks and heat exchangers in the chemical part of our business, and distillation columns and condensers. That has pretty much settled out. It's a weird phenomenon that's occurred from, say, mid to late April till now. There's not a lot of equipment on the market in terms of the small purchases that we use to replenish our inventory for the retail business, the onesies, the twosies, the tens. People are not making decisions right now. So numbers are down, frankly, on the retail side. There is a strange phenomenon that has been going on that I can't really understand, is that in that same time period where the retail business has been soft, any plant that's come to auction has brought lucrative numbers, at least ones that I've been tracking. There've been
gangbusters numbers.
Very few bad auctions in the last 6 months, is my experience. And actually a couple of stupendous auctions.
Across many different verticals, that's what we're finding as well, that auction prices have been stable throughout this. And it's more on the retail and on the end consumer side of things. And in some cases, the auction values have increased, particularly if you're talking about, any small bottling, packaging, or anything that you can use for any kind of, as you point out, hand sanitizers. It's like, hello, bring out the rest of the sanitizer tanks,
Yeah, exactly. And because people that we know that were packaging dealers they're calling us, like, help us find things, because that's exactly right, especially on the small sizes. I don't know the psychology that is driving the auction numbers. It may be because everybody's home and it's easier, although they can still buy online from any used machinery dealer. Maybe it's the fact that today's engineering buyers grew up in an Amazon world or an eBay world, and they're, my generation didn't, and it takes my generation a little bit more a leap of faith to buy a piece at auction that you haven't seen, but perhaps not by today's millennial auction buyers, because that's all they've ever known.
So the interesting dynamic, and again, kind of driving this back toward our target audience here is our respective customers, and mine being bank lenders. there's some solace knowing that auction prices in your vertical, in the processing chemical industry, are stable and maybe even strong for under all the gloom and doom that we're facing in the world right now. Those values are strong. So if you had a message for bankers right now, could I paraphrase to say that their value and their collateral is relatively stable under all the circumstances?
Yeah, sure. It's relatively stable. Of course, it depends on the sector. There's a lot of equipment that's designed to produce ethanol on the market right now. A lot of ethanol plants have closed in the last 6 months. And that makes no sense to me at all, because ethanol is alcohol, is hand sanitizer. So
yeah, but aren't most of those plants the giant Midwest plants that were built because of the gasoline additive mandate?
Correct.
So they can't be repurposed for anything else unless you rip them apart, and they're too big.
They can be repurposed to make isopropyl alcohol or ethyl alcohol.
Not as they sit though. You have to.
Yes, you
disassemble the components. Yeah, they're not plug and play.
It's not plug and play, correct. And that kind of equipment doesn't auction anyway.
No.
That's a 12-month sales process. It's
correct.
9 months.
And as I'll tell bank clients, those types of assets don't make good collateral.
Not typically, no.
They don't make good collateral. And a lot of banks don't understand that just because it costs $1 million, it doesn't mean that it makes good collateral. So
what makes good collateral right now is anything shiny. Okay, and I say that only half kidding. The pharma world right now, at least in the pharma equipment world, is really hot. I mean, and that's not counterintuitive. That's completely intuitive because of everything that's going on surrounding not just the search for a vaccine, but also all the work that's being done in therapeutics and anything that we've touched in that world recently. We just got finished a project where we sold 3 syringe manufacturing and filling plants, and the numbers were crazy good. The parts of my world that I think lenders should feel comfortable in are anything related to do with pharma and just about anything related to do with food. Food processing equipment is, again, I don't know the economics, but it seems to me that so many more people are eating at home and cooking at home now, and less to restaurants, and a lot of the big food suppliers have been able to retool. Instead of making 50-pound bags of soup, they can make small cans of soup, and so that world is evolving as well. So those two worlds are pretty strong for us.
It's all changing pretty quickly. And from an operational perspective, I think that the American economy has really shifted gears to deal with this quite well. So hopefully on the backside in Q4, when the uncertainties of the election and the pandemic become a little clearer within the calendar year, we'll be able to prognosticate with some more certainty.
And so I think 2021 is going to be good. I've always seen my mission in this crisis to pilot our little boat across this sort of raging river to the other shore where there's going to be lots of opportunity. Problem is they keep moving the other shore. Here's the good news for the lending world. Everything didn't fall apart in our world, in my world. So there still is that very robust backstop to their loans out there, which is the secondary market, that is still, and in some cases, you can make the case uncertainty breeds a need to maybe buy a used one instead of a new one, because who knows what the future holds. I'm pretty bullish about 2021. I think the rest of 2020 is just going to be a bumpy ride. I'm thinking more middle of 2021. I think up through March, it's still going to be a little funky, but I think Q2 next year, I think is going to start to see a real renaissance. And I'm not an economist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a politician. I'm just a business owner who has unfortunately been through a bunch of these already. And that's just where I feel we're heading.
Talking with Greg Epstein today, President and CEO of PeriVidex LLC. Greg, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Steve.